Okay, to be serious, checked out of this argument, and I thought it was really at a peak of the argument on will, and it was really unfortunate. She was throwing at me various philosophers. I don't know if my rejection of those philosophers was a part of her rejection of the argument, but I do think, I like to be serious. I think to be you're a little bit. Not sensitive or something. I mean, to me, I see you as a tough intellectual person that can just hardcore it, and then sometimes I see you reacting like, "Oh, I can't take the negative feedback." So I don't know if my feedback, because I've always just assumed you can handle my kind of feedback, though it's just as strongly emotional maybe as Gary's. It doesn't have a lot of "you're a fucktard," blah blah blah, bitch, you know. So I mean, I would think that it would be okay. Um, you said maybe it was other things, but still, it was unfortunate timing. Now we'd gotten to this Galen Strawson idea, and it was really useful for me because though I wholly reject it, it's useful to have things you can wholly reject. And I've been trying to say this. I say this a million ways. I've said this specific thing that we have to tell the story of being in terms of doing, not the other way around. And this is what's really useful about Galen Strawson's statement is that in his first statement, where he draws his unfree will argument, it says that what you do is based on who you are, and I do not believe that to be the case. It's very, very wrong, and it's wrong like going back in time when we're wondering, okay, light and dark are opposites. We can express light in terms of darkness and the absence of darkness, or we can express darkness in terms of light and the absence of light. Which do you want to do? For a lot of purposes, at the macroscope, it doesn't really matter. You can model the sun, even mathematically, and thereby make calculations and everything, as though it absorbs darkness. But as soon as you go and look for the material, you're trying to see things that have location and physical presence, you'll find it's the photons that have physical presence, the photons which are material, and it's fundamentally uh, important because by the time you're trying to figure out the emission spectra of heated hydrogen, you're going to have to know that it's not the darkness that's emitted, it's or absorbed. It's the light, and it's the same thing with doing and being. Being is a story, as a name, as a label, as a description of something that does. We say you're a thief. That's not why you stole stuff. That's why we call the fact that you stole stuff is why we call you a thief. So the material element here is the doing. That's the thing that has a material reality. That's the thing you can have a perception about. And as soon as you can have a perception about it, you don't need to talk about it in terms of externality. You can talk about it in terms of what all actions come to you as. Perceptions of motion, perceptions of change, a series of perceptions, a changing perception. Okay. So, it doesn't work the other way. If you say that what someone does is based on who they are, you can never know who they are. That's an externality. That's a necessarily logical externality when you give it the fundamental reality. When you give it the secondary reality, it's just a word of how we call someone. We say you're a carpenter. Why? Because you do a lot of carpentry related actions. Okay? You say, but I'm not a professional carpenter. Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, but you're the best carpenter I know. You do carpentry. So I'm going to call you a carpenter. No, I don't want to be called a carpenter because I don't do it for profession. I mean, this is all just semantics. What you are is semantics. What you are is just a category you can be placed in for cognitive purposes. It's not about you, it's about the person that's thinking about you. If you get this wrong, can you see why you'd get physics wrong if you just insisted that there's unphotons of darkness and they get absorbed by the things that appear to shine light? It's really taking darkness out of the surrounding area. Do you see how that would fail in terms of a material physical theory of how light works and energy? So at some point you have to sort these things out. You can say good in terms of bad, you can say bad in terms of good, you can do all of this in all sorts of dichotomies. Choose which one is your fundament, which one you're using. But if you dig down to a certain level, eventually you get the question of, well, which side of this dichotomy is really the material one? Which side of the dichotomy is really the material one? You can check. And how do you check? With your perceptions, which tell you about actions. They don't tell you about essence. They don't tell you the car is red, therefore it glows in red. No, they tell you that somehow a perception of a photon of a red wavelength was created. That's what you're told. You're not told about the car, right? The car could be a mirror reflecting a mirror painted with mirror, and it's a mirror colored, but it's reflecting red light from around it. Your perceptions can't tell you the essence. You have no access to what is. You have to deal with what changes, appears, and does. So you obviously have it backwards if you say what you do is based on who you are. No, who you are is based on what you do. Okay, and it's very unfortunate that To Be Serious would leave in the middle of this point. It's just maybe by coincidence, but it does mean that you get to escape a point that you made that challenged me, that caused my brain to engage and spend energy on it. And now, while that's useful for me and I can file it in my little bag of things to know and refer to, especially for people that want to like to discuss philosophers by name, and so that's useful, so I don't begrudge that. But as far as a conversation between you and me, you snuck out on it, and it's unfortunate, right, at such a key moment. I feel that this is such an obvious point, that there's a certain amount of ironic comedy to the fact that nobody gets it. Nobody gets why there's the error of being. Nobody gets how we're making the same mistake in the world in philosophy that we were making in mathematics before we invented calculus. Nobody seems to fucking get how wrong it is to say that what you do is based on who you are. I mean, that's bigoted. That's just so, it's so ancient and it's non-literary too. Nobody would write a novel that worked out on this. I mean, that's how Ayn Rand writes, certain kinds of people, and even she says some of the moochers, turn onto their brighter side and stop becoming moochers. Even she's showing that and it's just ridiculous. You have a fundamental nature that's responsible for everything you do, but you can change it. I mean, it's like the sun absorbs darkness, but it can also, I mean, it's like, look, what you are is a name for things that you've done, or else it's not what you really are. If you do things that put you in a category that has a name, then fine. That category semantically it applies, or it's held to apply. It's always justified in terms of your actions. So if one thing, if every English word had to be defined in French, then French would be the fundamental language, right? Every fucking idea of what is about something, what something is, has to be told in terms of action. So action's the real fundamental language. The language about action, that's the real language. Language about categories, that's our conveniences and approximations. Very useful, but when you promote those to these fundamental things, you're confusing yourself about the place of yourself in humanity, in nature, and among the knowledge, in my opinion. All right, cheers.